Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup, the last one of 2024, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about this week. I don't know if that means there's going to be a lot less next week or if this was just a whole bunch of stuff going on, but whatever, let's jump in and see what we got. First up is a fun one for Geo CD owners. The developer IQ132 has recently converted many classic Geo MVS games over to the Geo CD, which is great because while there were already a bunch of conversions done, not all of them were complete, which IQ132 fixed some of those, did some from scratch, but it's just a cool way to be able to experience Geo games on technically original hardware, even though it's not the MVS, and it's certainly cheaper than buying all the things that you would need to make that other stuff happen. So I think people who own Geo CDs would really appreciate this and at least want to check out Ray's post and see all the details. There was a bunch of fixes to the older conversions, though. The older ones had generally a loud screeching noise when the game assets couldn't quite fit into the CDs, so into the CD's internal RAM. So that was fixed with this. There's some demos here if you want to check it out. But also, there's a few conversions of other arcade games that were never available on any SNK platform before. So I think the releases start with Prisoner of War and Atomic Runner Chelnov. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. My apologies. But Ray's got a really detailed post with tons of video links and a ton of information on all of this stuff as well. So basically, if you own a Geo CD, I would call this a must-read. Or if you're just a fan of cool stuff like this, definitely check out Ray's post, and it might be something you're interested in. Next up is something I have kind of mixed feelings about, but I'll start with the good. The company Mod Retro, who makes the Chromatic, that new Game Boy Color, has just posted the source code, and it looks like it's a fork of the Mister's Game Boy Color core. Mod Retro, I believe, has done everything according to the open source license and is fully compliant. I think. I could be wrong, but they're certainly not in, huge violation of the terms. If they missed something, it's a small thing. They generally seem like they're doing everything by the book, which I think is absolutely excellent. And it's also a real nod to the Mr. devs who make this stuff and allow it to be open sourced like this, because that code would have had to have been very stable in order to make a hardware product out of it. Now, I do have to absolutely say that it is not easy to manufacture a high quality device, even if the core is already done. Taking that core and building a high quality motherboard to go along with it, getting that awesome screen that everybody seems to like, and even just the basic stuff, getting the enclosure correct and all of that, that's a lot of work. So by no means did they just grab an FPGA core and slap it onto a generic piece of hardware. They did a lot of hard work, and I think it's a testament to the Mr. devs on how good that core is that they're able to do it. Now, it also appears to use a Gaiden FPGA, and part of the open source terms is they have to also post their source, which they've started posting. So that technically means that if you really want to go about doing this, you could port this core to basically any of the compatible Gaiden FPGAs. So that's neat too. But there is another side of this that I just can't help but see, and I will fully admit that maybe I am just a grumpy old man, and I also will admit that my opinion is absolutely jaded because I know so many Mr. devs, and I know how much time and effort they put into this stuff that they just give away for free. So keep that in mind. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but the company Mod Retro is owned by somebody worth a gazillion dollars. They don't need money. They don't need this to work. They could have very easily come out and been honest after the product's released, said, by the way, shout out to the amazing Mr. team. We're using their cores. Check out we'll have a page up if you want to support them on Patreon to all the just different devs, or just, a generic link to something that's Mr. related. They could have done any kind of shout outs, and they chose not to. And this type of stuff really drives me nuts. Once again, I'm biased because RetroRGB's entire existence is based around promoting everybody that does amazing things. That's what I do. So of course I'm going to be biased in this. But I will admit that if I were in their position, even if I tried to do this myself without a gazillion dollars behind me, I would not at first have mentioned Mr. at all, because I want to avoid the Bitfunk scenario. I don't want to tell everybody I'm using the Mr. core on a Gaiden FPGA, because chances are Bitfunks would have beat them to market with some really low quality piece of crap that doesn't even work. So I definitely would have done what they did, as to just keep my mouth shut, then release everything after the product started shipping. I do think that is fair, and I would defend anybody who did that. I'm not going to be biased because of who owns it. I treat everybody the same. But after it was released, I absolutely would have made a very big deal about Mister and what Mister is and how something so accurate came to be. And what kind of drove the point home is Reggie, the former president of Nintendo of America, tweeted about it. And it's like, there's so much history of Nintendo shutting down emulation and kind of, snubbing their nose at the scene. Yet the former president is promoting this product that's based off of Mister. They should have said something, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong and it's totally fine, but it would have taken away from nothing if they just simply bragged about how awesome Mister is and then followed it up by bragging about how much work it takes to take a core like that and make it into a handheld device. So I still think that the Chromatic is a really cool device. I still don't get involved with who makes it and why. That stuff drives me crazy. I separate the artist from the art. I mean, my favorite, the reason I play guitar is Dave Mustaine. So anybody who knows metal knows that, I can separate the artist from the art itself. But I just thought that this kind of was like not a good thing to do to the community, to just kind of snub everybody like this. But it is on par with what they've done since the first announcement. They brought a popular YouTuber to go steal everybody's thunder at a gaming convention. They couldn't even work with people in the scene. I mean, it's kind of felt disrespectful from day one, but whatever. I still think it's a cool product. If you have extra money to spend and you love the Game Boy Color and you want a portable Mister Game Boy Color core, then by all means think about this. But I truly do think for everybody else, the Analog Pocket is by far a better choice for all the reasons. And also, it looks like Kuro has figured out a little bit why and how the Analog Pocket screen could be more in line with this one as far as accuracy. So hopefully Analog could put out a firmware update to kind of tweak that. I'll be talking about that more in a different post because I think that's really worth its own focus, but I'll wait till I either, hear something from Analog or a little more from Kuro or something. But I don't know. I didn't mean to word vomit too much about this. I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts because I like the device. It's obviously good because it's based off an awesome core, but yeah, this whole thing kind of rubs me the wrong way. Next up, the company Kanto just released a more powerful version of their fully magnetically shielded speaker line called the Auras. These are a little bit bigger, about 1 inch in each side, and they output 70 watt versus 50 RMS, or 140 versus 100 peak. So it's a slightly bigger and slightly more powerful speaker with a slightly lower frequency response as well, which I'm not sure how much lower it could go because there was a lot of low end on the originals. But this has USB, Bluetooth, and RCA inputs. They're fully magnetically shielded, which means you could use them next to a PC CRT monitor. If you have an old school rig, you could use it next to your PVMs. And they also come with a whole bunch of different stands depending on what your application is. Now, these are essentially the same as the ones that I reviewed last year, just a little bit bigger, and I really, really liked them. I did think in some occasions I felt they were a little bit too bass heavy, but in other times I thought it was kind of awesome to have that extra low end, especially from tiny speakers. But if you want a great overview of what to expect, then that video still stands. And of course, if you want to know why you need magnetically shielded speakers around CRTs, I have another video for that. I have not heard these myself, but I do think that you should be able to, because they're from Amazon, you could return them if you don't like them, but I would just expect kind of the same thing, just maybe a little heavy on the low end, or I don't know, maybe if they're using they are using larger speakers in these, like larger cones and everything, maybe that's able to get a more full range sound, so they're less low end heavy. I don't know. I'd love to hear how they sounded. So if anybody ends up buying them, please let me know in the comments or anywhere basically, because I really liked the Auras. So the Aura 4 should be the same thing, but just probably a little bit better and bigger. The only other thing to note is I really liked their different stands. They had sent me a couple to try, and I liked the look, but also how they were different. They fit your desk perfectly in that the angled ones are great for people that sit higher up. The ones that were straight ahead are great for people that sit lower. And they do have floor stands, but they're very expensive. So I put the links there, both because they're affiliate links and why not try to get that extra 3 cents off the sale, but also so that you could compare them to whatever the cheaper ones that you might find would be. Because I think for me personally, just an opinion, if you got these on a desk or on a table set up next to your PVMs, check out their stands because they look really cool. But if you're getting these to put on floor stands, you might just want to get some generic ones. And, audiophiles, please feel free to remind me that that's stupid because you want the flow of the sound into the yada yada. I know. I'm just trying to save people money here. So high-end audiophiles aren't going to spend $400 on a set of speakers. They're going to spend $2,000. So I'm just trying to always find a happy medium here. So yeah, brand new magnetically shielded speakers. I have the links to everything here if you want the originals or the larger ones. And if you buy the larger ones, please let me know how they sound. Next up, Miss Mad Lemon just released another album, this one called Subdued Light. And like the previous albums, these were made on either completely original Amiga hardware or through some of the trackers and emulation. But basically, this is a music that could be played on an Amiga, and that's how the album is recorded, so that you get the exact sound that you would off of original analog hardware, which does give it a very distinct feel to it, all of the albums. But I do like how all of the albums are varied. They all have different styles of music, and I did enjoy this one very much. I've bought basically all of hers, I think, and I reviewed the last 3. And while I didn't have time to do a full review on this one, I will say that Maddie's had a pretty rough year, so I kind of went into this hoping it wasn't a depressing album, which, look, I know that's disrespectful. You all could flame me as much as you want, including Maddie, but I like happy music, which if you don't listen to metal, you might be thinking that's crazy. You listen to metal, but metal is actually happy music if you think about it. So it's one of those things where it's like, all right, let me take a deep breath and listen. And it was not that at all. I found the songs to be very positive and kind of uplifting feeling. So you could kind of, if you watch the album watch the how the album was made video that she had made, which I put right on the top of the post, you absolutely get a feel of what she was going through, and you kind of feel that in the songs. I listened to the songs first so I could have like an unbiased opinion, and then I went back and watched that video, and it was just one of those things where it was like, I'm so glad the album came out the way it did. It was happy to listen to. I thought it was great. As always, I like some songs better than others, but that's perfect. You don't want the same song over and over. So if you're a fan of music, just check out some of these. As always, you could listen to all of her songs completely free on Bandcamp, but if you do enjoy them, I strongly recommend supporting in any way. Buy the album, sign up for the Patreon, whatever. And if you thought, hey, that was kind of neat, but it's not my thing, that's why it's up there for free. So that way you don't have to pay just to listen. So, and also if you want to hear more from Maddie, check out the interview we did a while back. I'd love to do a follow-up one at some point in the future, but that'll certainly be a good introduction to her and what to expect. And just congrats, Maddie, on another awesome album. The developer Infidelity has just released his latest NES to SNES conversion, and this is for the first 3 Ninja Gaiden games for the NES. And this is not a tweak of the SNES trilogy that was released. There was a lot of negative feedback about that one, and I think the first game was all right and the other 2 kind of weren't. Do your research on that if you'd like, but this is not that. This is what the developer Infidelity has been doing for a couple of years now, and taking these games and allowing them to run on the SNES's faster processor with some of the extra enhancements in MSU1 audio. And basically it reduces sprite flicker and slowdown and allows you to use the SNES. So if you want RGB output, all you need is a cable rather than a mod. And I haven't had a chance to really dig into this. I just played it for a couple of seconds, and this was awesome. When the game boots, you just use the left and right arrow on your controller to select which game that you want. And then each of the games have original audio, which uses Membler's 2A03 sound emulator to convert it, which comes out very close to the original. Or there's an MSU1 arranged version of the soundtrack, which has CD quality audio if you have the ability to play any of that. If you don't, you just use the original single file, the 1 ROM. And if you do have it, whether it's the FX Pack Pro, Mister, or any kind of software emulation, you'd have the whole thing with the WAV files. Also, the original Ninja Gaiden 1 has a third sound option for the PC Engine soundtrack, which I believe the PC Engine version was completely different than the NES version, but maybe you might prefer to try out that soundtrack. So I think that was pretty cool as well. The other things to note, I listed all of the changes, which the developer Infidelity always makes as little changes as possible to make sure that the games are true to the original. And you could still see if any other patches might work, or maybe he might add them, but these are really designed to just be the original games, but without any of the limitations of the NES. However, if you press select during gameplay, you could then, it brings up a menu and you could hit left and right to scroll through different color palettes to pick whichever one that you choose. And there's a ton in there. I'm always so happy to see this because some games really look the best with one palette and some don't matter as much, but other games really make a huge difference on which palette you choose. And this is all just, it's not like it adds lag. Whatever your eyes prefer is the right answer. So definitely do that. And also, if you want to get back to the game select menu, press the start button and then up plus B to exit. And there's a couple of other things that are done to each game, which are right here in the notes. And it basically is just doesn't let it freeze at the end after you've beaten it. And there's a couple other fixes in there. So check it out if you're interested. This, as always, is free, just like all the other stuff that he does. But if you want to support, please consider doing so on Patreon, because I'm really enjoying all of these. And for a lot of these games, I'll just never play the NES version anymore because it's the same exact game. I just get to play on the controller I prefer with less slowdown and basically no flicker. So definitely check this out if you're a fan of those games. Next up, the developer Zaxor has done a ton of work documenting and creating stuff for the Pioneer LaserActive, which was that extremely expensive Laserdisc player that also allowed for a specific type of game, the LaserActive games, as well as plug-in modules that would let you play Genesis and Sega CD stuff, as well as some PC Engine stuff. And to put it into perspective, back in the day, you could have bought a Laserdisc player, a Genesis, a Sega CD, and a 32X for less money than just the Pioneer LaserActive. So this is definitely a rare thing and an expensive thing, but they all have issues with the capacitors, the power boards, and it's really cool to see Zaxor put so much work into documenting this stuff up on the Console Mods Wiki. He and Simon Locke, aka Ergon, I apologize if I got that name wrong, have been documenting as much as they could and put it right up on the wiki. So I asked Zaxor if he wouldn't mind writing up a post, just kind of summarizing the work that he's done and linking to the wiki, of course, where all of it is, because I really wanted to be able to get this information out there, as well as all of the different enhancements. And I've talked about almost all of them here, I think. And Tito's shown some in his videos. The no-cut mod that allows for RGB output from Genesis, the power supply board that allows you to just plug and play, drop that in and replace the others. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff for the different modules. Definitely check out this post if you have a LaserActive or if you're interested in it. But I just thought this was a great summary of the work that was done, and I just wanted to highlight it, and who better to than Zaxor himself. So thank you, Zaxor, and also thank you for all the other work that you do. The triple bypass stuff has really been amazing, and I just, I appreciate all the work that people put into documenting this stuff on the wiki. So if you're a LaserActive fan, absolutely check this out. Or if you're just a nerd like me who wants to see what this is all about, definitely check it out. The developer Apocalypse is selling an adapter that allows you to play 8-bit Japanese Sega games on standard Sega Master System consoles. And in order to understand why that's even a thing, I got to give you a very, very brief history of the Master System, but stick with me because I want to get back to the adapter itself in a second. But Sega originally released a console called the SG-1000, and then afterwards released a slightly more powerful, backward-compatible version called the Mark III. Then the same guts and chips that were in that Mark III were remade into a board and shell that most of us know as the Sega Master System. That shell and casing and cartridges are different than the Japanese ones, and specifically the cartridge size and the PCB itself are both different. So you can't just pop the PCB out of one cart and then just stick it directly into the board. The cart slots themselves are different sizes with a different amount of pins on them. And then eventually Sega released the Master System in Japan. Some people call it the MK2000, some people just call it the Japanese Master System. And while it looked like the worldwide release, it had the same cartridge size as all of the Japanese releases for obvious reasons. So if you want to use any of those games on a US or worldwide Master System, you need some kind of converter to fit them in. Now, of course, you could just get a ROM cart, but stuff like this is really designed for people who have original cartridges and want to use those. And this adapter is unique for a couple of reasons. First, it presents itself as a valid SMS ROM during the console's BIOS checks, so any games that are not compatible with just standard pin converters will work with this one. Now, there are some shortcomings, but they're all related to how the Master System and Genesis work. So basically, if you use these on a Master System, everything should be fine, except the colors on the SG-1000 games would be a little bit off. However, it also would be a little bit off if you took an SG-1000 game and plugged it into the Mark III or the MK-2000. Sega's own consoles would have this issue, and it's due to a flaw in the VDP and how Sega hard-coded the colors. And it's a small difference, and some games might look better, some games might not, but it has nothing to do with this adapter. That's just a Sega issue that you might deal with. Also, if you plug this into the power base converter, it won't work on the Genesis with the SG-1000 or SC-3000 games because the Genesis doesn't have that original mode in its chips. That's why this is fully compatible with the Master System, but this would still use Japanese Master System games on the Genesis. That part will still work, just not the SG-1000. And anybody that has ROM carts knows that's the same thing with that. And even one or two games, F-16 Fighting Falcon is definitely the one that I'm thinking of, is a Master System game, but it actually is technically an SG-1000 game, and that won't run on the Genesis either for the same exact reasons. So the shortcomings of this device are essentially the same shortcomings that Sega had in their consoles anyway. So the price is $50, and it comes as a complete in-box package, including the standard SMS case, the standard checkerboard one, and a shell. So when you get this, it's going to look like an official product. And once again, if you have a ROM cart and you're able to play all the stuff that you want to, you don't need this. But if you're already listening, or if you're still listening to me after 3+ minutes of rambling on about this, you're either somebody who appreciates hardware like this, or you have a library of Japanese Master System games, and maybe a Japanese and a US one too, just for example. And it's much easier to replace the ones that are local to you. So you might want to just be using those original cartridges on the one that, if it dies, it'd be a lot easier to replace. It's totally up to you, though. I personally think stuff like this and the ColecoVision adapter is absolutely awesome. And just a funny shout out, I had no idea Apocalypse made this, even though lots of people were asking me about it, especially after that whole MK2000 or the Master System to MK2000 adapter that allowed you to put an EverDrive into the Japanese Master System or Mark III or whatever else. People said, oh, that's awesome, but what about the opposite? I had no idea Apocalypse made this thing. And after I did the write-up about the ColecoVision adapter, Mitsurugi was kind of like, hey, he sells this too. I was like, I felt very dumb because I love stuff like this and I'm sad that I forgot to promote it. So my apologies to Mitsurugi and Apocalypse, but if you want one of these things, just check out the thread and it gives you instructions on how to contact Mitsurugi to purchase one. And I just think it's awesome. And I think any fans of the Master System should at least take a look and see what you think. The developer RetroRaider John has just announced that they're attempting to port Tomb Raider 2 over to the Sega Saturn. This project originally started out as an attempt to port the 3-level PC demo over, but then they decided why not just try to port the whole thing. And this is being done by inserting levels, models, and gameplay elements from Tomb Raider 2 into the officially released Tomb Raider 1's code. However, there's a lot of attention to detail that they're paying attention to and trying to pull off. Things like implementing the waiting and climbing mechanics and certain sound effects and stuff like that. And the developer said that certain elements are still extremely unlikely to be ported over. It's just that a bunch of levels don't necessarily need them. So this is one of those things that this is just a really cool proof of concept and something that might be neat to experience this game. And I think this is just my opinion. I certainly don't mean anything negative by this, but I feel like if you just want to play Tomb Raider 2, you would just grab a PlayStation or a Mister and play Tomb Raider 2. But this is kind of an experiment as to what could be done on the Saturn and kind of fun to experience a game as, what would it have been like? And I have tremendous respect for all devs who spend a lot of time working on this stuff. So I think this is a really fun tech demo, and I'm interested to see how it progresses. There's already a demo that you could play now, and it looks like maybe mid-2025 there should be 2 levels available, but if you're a fan of development or the Saturn or anything, give Danthrax's post a read and check this thing out. Shank just posted a video about the world's largest CRT. a display that many people accused of being vaporware or just promotional hype and not ever actually existing, but it did. And Shank and a couple of friends found it at a restaurant in Japan. And the story behind rescuing this is almost as cool as the monitor itself. Basically, a complete stranger came to Shank's aid and took care of all of this, and for really no personal gain whatsoever. Turns out that person's a game developer, so they obviously understand the love of older tech. And it's one of these things that it's such a good story. And I think the video is starting to really blow up and go viral. And I am so happy to see this. A better person couldn't have deserved to have a video blow up like this, but there's not many stories as good as this one out there. It's just all positive. And even Shank at the end kind of did some fun, playful trolling, and it's my kind of trolling. It's zero hatefulness. There's no mean-spirited stuff. It's just very fun. And I think even the people that maybe were accidentally the butt of the joke would probably feel like, okay, that's funny. I appreciate that. I don't want to spoil it, but that's definitely a good one. It's a monitor that seems absolutely amazing. The only thing about it that I guess from a nerd point of view, I was disappointed in is this was one of those monitors that converts all signals to 31 kilohertz when you insert it. So it's not a true multi-format monitor, but with a basic line doubler, you could absolutely get 15 kilohertz stuff working on it. But your end result might be close to one of those 40-inch XBRs, except this is a old school curved TV. But it doesn't make the story any less awesome or the display itself. I just think this is super cool. I loved the story. I loved the video. And please watch this one and share it. I really think it'll put a smile on basically every one of us fellow nerds' faces. And even people that might not even be into video games or displays would probably enjoy the story behind this one. So thanks to Shank for making this, and to Durf and to all the other people who helped over a couple of years. I've been following the progress of this behind the scenes with Shank the whole time, and it's just been awesome to see unfold. So thank you, Shank, and thank you to everybody who was a part of this. Next up, the game Team Innocent Point of No Return has just received a full English translation that was over a decade in the works. Derek Pescarilla had worked on this, and while he said his role in it was relatively minor, it was a project that was extremely special to him. And he put together a very detailed post showing everything that you would need to know, a link to the GitHub on where to download the patch, and also a walkthrough guide, game maps, and this thing even has subtitled FMVs. So this is just one of those things where if this is the type of game that you wanted to play and you own a PCFX, now you could do so without speaking and reading Japanese. And I'm always such a huge fan of all the work that goes into this, and just being able to have people experience brand new games to them that they would have never been able to before. So this is kind of interesting because I don't know much about the PCFX at all. So I think it's probably the most respectful thing I could do is just to point you to Derek's post, because I know the basics, but I think this seems to be a game that means a lot to a lot of people. And I think they were very happy to see this translation completed, or at least completed to the point where, it could be released and playable to everybody. So please check out Derek's post for more info, but always so cool to see something like this. And maybe one of these days I'll borrow a friend of mine's PCFX and give this a try on original hardware. John Linneman recently released a DF Retro video, which is the first entry in a new series he's working on that compares games that were released on both the Sega Saturn and Sony PlayStation. And this is a series that, if we could have seen this back in the day, it probably would have been mind-blowing to have a visual side-by-side examples and deep dive frame rate analysis done of all of this stuff. It's, very John Linneman style, and obviously I mean that with love. And this is one of those things that maybe you remember the Saturn versus PlayStation argument back in the day. Maybe you don't care at all, but you're just interested like me and want to see the differences in hardware. And while I don't want to spoil things, skip to the next section. This is a minor spoiler because he says it at the beginning of the video, but essentially, while there are exceptions, games that were made on one platform and then ported to another tend to do better on the console that it was originally designed for. So it's one of those things that it doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other, and the Saturn holds up quite a bit in quite a few different games. So I think over the years, people have started to kind of think that the Saturn was a much less powerful system than the PlayStation, but it just wasn't the case. For me personally, my opinion on this is I absolutely don't care about console wars at all. The last time I cared, I was a little kid, and I only really cared because it was something fun to argue about with my friends, like sports rivalries and stuff like that. But I never cared, but I loved this video. This video focused on driving games, but there's going to be a bunch more on different genres of games in there. And it was so cool to see the platforms side by side and to see the shortcomings of each that you'll see throughout this whole series, but also the strengths of each, sometimes which are kind of impressive and surprising. So I really just couldn't recommend this more. This is just perfect for any nerd that loves analysis videos, and especially retro nerds that want to check out these older things. So thanks to John for doing these, and I can't wait for the next video. Well, that's it for this week, and I guess that's it for Roundups in 2024. Not like it really makes a difference or anything, but I guess putting 2024 to a close with a bunch of awesome stuff to talk about was definitely a lot of fun. And thank you to any newcomers we have that have joined and been listening to this. And of course, thank you to everybody who's been suffering through my podcast for a very long time. I try to get better every time I do it, but anybody that's seen certain weeks, there's always bumps in the road, like the I'm almost blind week. I still thought that was kind of funny though, but thank you for putting up with me for yet another year of this stuff. And like I said at the beginning, maybe because there were so many posts this week, there'll be less next. I don't know. I never force it. I always write about stuff that I'm genuinely excited about, and I think the other contributors do as well. And it all, for the contributors, it's extra time for them. So if there's a bunch of posts or if there's very few next week, whatever, I'm just happy that there's still awesome stuff to talk about and such very, very cool people in the scene. So I will see you on the first day of 2025 next week. And I think I might still be able to do a Q&A this week. I'm not sure. I got people staying over, which is why you can probably see all the stuff folded up back there in this office / movie theater / guest room / storage area that I work out of. So whatever. It's still bigger than my New York City apartment. But anyway, as always, thank you to everybody. Thank you to the supporters, especially because you're the ones who's really keeping this stuff going. And I will see you all next year. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.